Hello, peoples, and welcome to Esoterica Cinema, the program where we take films and discuss the hell out of them. My name is Jason Peters, and with me, as always, is the man chiefly responsible for overseeing the illegal trade of counterfeit Wes Anderson Blu-rays on the dark web. That's right, it's Mr. Ryan Seybold.
Ooh, what's up, Jason? How's it going, buddy?
I was just going to say, I want to specify, these are only Wes Anderson Blu-rays. You are not interested in anything else. You have a lane. You stay there. Only responsible for counterfeit Wes Anderson Blu-rays.
Yes, absolutely. You still owe me for your copy of The Fantastic Mr. Wolf and The Life-Turanian. Yeah, The Life-Turanian and The Fantastic Mr. Wolf. They were good movies.
Yeah. They absolutely were. Yeah. It reminds me of how, what is it, in like Laos or whatever, they have like fake Tom Cruise and stuff.
Yeah,
like,
it's good
feel
stuff.
Like he starred in those.
Yeah, Mission
we're
Really
not here
Tough.
to talk about.
Yeah.
But we're not here to talk about counterfeit DVDs all episode. No, we are here to discuss a movie. Ryan, do you have a description for us, sir?
That's right, buddy. Today's film continues our series covering some classic anime with Metropolis from 2001. We're quickly dropped into the middle of the titular city of Metropolis, ruled over by corrupt politicians who are guided by wealthy industrialist and villain extraordinaire Duke Red. They've been using robots to build up the city and handle most all laborious jobs and maintain the city, and this has created class disparity amongst the citizens, many of whom are now out of work and are planning a revolution. Duke Red has enlisted the help of evil inventor Dr. Lawton to create a god-tier level cyborg, the adorable yet terrifying Tima, to sit on the throne of his new industrial complex known as the Ziggurat, to take full dominion over all, human and robot alike. We then follow several plot lines and characters around the city as Duke Red and his nefarious schemes are being sniffed out by the oh-so-lovable Detective Bon and his nephew Kenichi. The film is steeped equally in the lore of the 1927 Fritz Lang film, as well as the manga from Astro Boy creator Osamu Tezuka. It was directed by anime legend Rintaro, with a screenplay by Akira's very own Katsuhiro Otomo. The numbers were a little shaky on this one, but best I could tell, this had a budget of around $14 million and only brought in around $4 million on the highest of estimates, give or take. It was received well by the critics of its day, including Roger Ebert. But as always, I've got to ask my favorite critic of my day, Jason. What did you think about this movie, my friend?
Shucks. I'm your favorite critic. No, just kidding. Ryan, as always, going to be happy to tell you here with my opening statement. Now, Metropolis is a unique film with a lot to offer by way of its visuals and sound elements, with a vibrant mixture of hand-drawn and computer-generated imagery that combine to make for a unique, if somewhat technologically aged vision. The characters here are well-drawn, both literally and developmentally, while also maintaining a certain simplicity in both respects. Metropolis presents a unique vision of its particular brand of dystopian future, where it sort of like blends these old-fashioned ideas and representations of wealth and wealth disparity with a lot of like new age technology and sort of futurist visions. So I enjoyed the heady themes of, robots' places in the future and society, the examinations of what does and doesn't make one sentient or human. But when all was said and done, I do have to admit that I did feel as though a lot of the themes and examinations were almost sort of just like scratched on the surface, at this like surface level only. And I sort of would have loved to have had a greater examination of the class clashes between like the robots and the lower class revolutionaries. I would have loved to have seen more of that, just sort of like strewn across the film. Would have loved to have gotten a chance to know characters from both of those sides a little bit more definitively. Also would have loved a deeper look into Tima's struggle with, herself and humanity both before and after she understands herself to be a robot. And finally, I wish we had a lot more of Perot. Perot, dude, you were with us and just gone so quickly. That was a great character that was sent off with a surprising lack of ceremony. I understand that's kind of the point. When all was said and done, I really did enjoy this movie, especially the film's climax with that absolutely perfect and wonderful use of the Ray Charles song, I Can't Stop Loving You. Easily the film's standout sequence. But I do also wish that the film had used more of its time to delve further into some of those deeper and more complex themes that it had presented. Ryan, how about you, sir?
So, Jason, This was a series on this show that I was selfishly excited for because anime was always a kind of 1 degree of separation away from my movie watching taste for some reason. I would absorb and enjoy whatever came across my plate, but I never really sought films like this out for whatever reason. Shame on me though, as this was one of my most enjoyable experiences with animation ever, perhaps equaling Akira.
Dude.
Rintaro and his production studio Madhouse, that he also helped found in 1972, created such a fun balance of the vintage anime stylings of wide-eyed, cute characters, alongside dramatic and heartfelt themes and characterizations that were iconic to writer Katsuhiro Otomo. The animation itself was gorgeous, once again animating on the ones, or a true 24 frames per second, as we saw in Akira, but also blending in some computer animation, and making that look cool in 2001 was no easy task. The Art Deco aesthetic was all brought to life by a swanky soundtrack of New Orleans-style jazz and blues by Japanese composer Toshiyuki Honda that culminates perfectly in the use of Ray Charles' I Can't Stop Loving You. No one aspect of this film jumped out at me, but rather they all worked in perfect harmony to give me a film-watching experience I never saw coming. But perhaps the most shocking thing about this film is that you can't seem to find it anywhere, which is a sin, deserving of
crazy,
the attention of our new pope. You'll laugh, you'll cry, you'll wonder who you are. Jason, I loved this movie.
Dude. That's amazing. I'm so happy to hear that. So this was your first viewing then, is that correct?
It totally was, yes.
Yeah, it might as well have been my first viewing because I actually saw this film once before, like close to when it came out back in 01 or 03, whatever it was. So
yeah.
Going back a ways, right? Like it's been 20 years since I've seen this film. Also, just out of curiosity, have you seen the Fritz Lang Metropolis?
I have, yeah, absolutely.
That dude, that's one of those movies where it's like, I know, like having my like movie nerd card revoked, but I've never seen Metropolis, you know? So I can't really speak to like what aspects of that film influenced this film. So, you know, maybe you can shed a little bit of light on that, but Ryan, there's a lot we can discuss here. Let's go ahead and start off with, let's do the visuals and the animation style. Okay,
sure.
So like, personally, I found this to be an interesting mix of traditional animation and what is kind of clear now at the time was sort of the beginning of CGI, computer-generated imagery.
Sure.
And this film often mixes both of those, especially with like a lot of like those sort of booming and stretching shots of like the ziggurat. We see that, you know, very early on, which is the central piece of architecture that's in the city of Metropolis.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like the art direction was pretty consistently phenomenal between sort of splitting the difference between that like traditional classic art deco feel with more of like a pop animation sensibility. It's really interesting the way that they sort of did that. Again, I do feel like it's a bit unfortunate that like the CGI maybe hasn't aged as well as it could have, which isn't like a fault of the film. It's just kind of the unfortunate reality of using like CGI. Mm-hmm. But at least we still get like, you know, weird giant fish swimming around the sky outside a giant skyscraper. So I personally loved the distinct visual style. How about you?
So some of the CGI works better than others. And the reason for
definitely.
that is because they realized that they couldn't do everything with CGI. And so they would do a lot of pre-visualization with the CGI and use that as like a stand-in and then paint over it. And so there is a lot in this film, a lot of backdrops and extras and background animation and stuff like that that actually did get drawn in over CGI. They would use the CGI to like, you know, pre-vis it up and get it going, and then they would draw over it. But then there is some scenes, like, for example, the finale scene of Tima when she is at the ziggurat that stands out to me right away, where there seems to be almost like a microchip or a bunch of like weird, it's like a weird industrialized multi-layered floor that they're all just kind of walking on as if it's flat. But you could see there's like textures in it. I feel like someone would have twisted their ankle if they were like actually walking on that. It didn't make any sense to me visually. Like, you know, the layers didn't line up. So some things worked, some things didn't. The giant fish in the fish tank, when we first get introduced to the detective and his nephew, awesome. Like when that came in, I was like, oh, this is cool. Like this is some Adult Swim level coolness. But then other things kind of didn't, namely, like I said, especially coming off of Akira, where the city was so played up as a backdrop and a character and so rich in texture with those hand-painted landscapes and wide shots. And then you go into this and it's all kind of like that aged digital from 2001 that just kind of
Yeah,
looks
exactly.
like they're shooting for something, and they probably reached a high bar for its time. But in the
Exactly,
end,
yeah.
it ages as well as like Jabba the Hutt's edition in the special edition of A New Hope. You go back and watch that, and you're
Yeah.
like, oh, this is hot garbage. Why'd they even
Yeah,
leave this
dude,
in?
go back and watch like the Lawnmower Man,
Yeah,
like
right.
that like blew all
That
of our
kinda
minds
shit.
at the time. And now,
Yeah.
and you're like, oh, dude, this kind of looks like very early video games or something. It just
This is
doesn't
10-bit.
hold
Yeah.
up. And like, yeah. And unfortunately, you do kind of have to like, grant it that like you already have to suspend your, disbelief quite a bit when you're talking about, fish floating in these giant tanks and stuff like that. But like even more so with some of the effects, it's like watching those old like Ray Harryhausen movies, right? With like Jason and the Argonauts or, Clash of the Titans. Like at a certain point, it becomes part of the charm of it,
Sure.
But unfortunately, it seems like CGI doesn't age with the same charm that like clay, a lot of the clay work did with Harryhausen and stuff like that.
Here's what I realized about it, and I'll leave it at this. Because I trust me, I had to sleep on this to figure this out in my head. When there's CGI and normal hand-drawn animation interacting with each other on screen at the same time, 9 times out of 10, I'm okay with it. When it really stood out like a sore thumb is when we would cut for some awesome hand-drawn stuff that I'm having a really fun time with, and then it would go to the landscapes of nothing but CGI. It was very jarring.
Yeah.
It didn't blend well to go from like, hey, we're all fun with, big cutesy eyes and all this stuff. And then we're going to, the age CGI with nothing else on the screen. That transition or that juxtaposition was really rough shot to me. That's kind of where I sit with it.
Yeah, definitely. Now, I do think that one of the things that the film does well with regards to its visuals is, and we kind of saw this a lot in Akira as well, is just that world building,
Sure.
The sense of what this exact world of Metropolis is. Right. It's, again, it's that perfect marriage of sort of like old timey swanky jazz and Art Deco classic New York success. But also it's got that class disparity as well. Right. So we see like the slums that are in Zone 1. And the funny thing is, in those slums, we notice that the color scheme is actually very vibrant and it's very diverse. We see a lot of very different colors, purples and greens and orange, even in like the sort of establishing wide shot, where they sort of show you Zone 1 and you see all of the different carriages and all of the different sort of industrial machinery that's been sort of converted into living spaces and a lot of that,
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to see that, whereas oftentimes when they shoot the ziggurat, especially like at night, it's very sort of like one note, it's very dark. Like they almost have sort of like blacks and grays that it's being lit up with that sort of go along with like the gold, right? So it almost gives it this menacing, foreboding kind of look when they're like lighting it at night, especially in that opening scene. It's really cool to see that they were able to effectively go into both of the different artistic styles and, really use that to, again, juxtapose that class difference between the Ziggurat Metropolis and then the Zone 1 slum Metropolis.
Honestly, I hadn't even thought about that. That's really interesting that your color scheme and color palette kind of like denotes the bleak, boring upper class, the bourgeoisie, if you will, and then, the vibrant, colorful lower class down below in the underground.
Yeah, absolutely. And also you had mentioned on the ones that we're animating on the ones here, similar to, Akira or Redline or some of these others that we've looked at with this anime series. This is another one where they ended up using over 150,000 animation cells when all was said and done, which is a large part of that $14 to $15 million budget that you were talking about.
Yeah.
It was a 5-year production. And just to give a sense of why so much time would be required, just to effectively color one animation cell, it would take 2 hours for them to paint that. So just for the painting and coloring alone, you're talking about 2 hours times 150,000. That's 300,000 hours just painting the cells.
Yeah.
You did nothing else, right? So
unreal.
Also, like, I don't know if you had this thought at any point in time. I understand that it's, based on this comic book from, 50s or so. I've never actually personally read it, but as I was being introduced to the world, it kind of reminded me of the Fifth Element, the world of the Fifth Element a little bit. Like we've got these hover taxis, we've got multiple levels. We've got these sort of slums, but the slums are very sort of vibrant, but it's also like reconstituted industrial materials and obviously very different protagonists in these respective. But you could also say that Mia Jovovich's Fifth Element character is somewhat in the same realm
kind of
like a Tima, to a degree. Yeah, absolutely.
I'd go down that road with you.
Similarities there.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, just as a little backstory here, this is based on the manga by Osamu Tezuka, who is the creator of Astro Boy. Now, Tezuka is known as the granddaddy of them all, of all manga. Like, he's one of the first mainstream manga artists and creators that was successful. Astro Boy is kind of the old school Superman, if you want to think of that, from Action Comics. That kind of kicked off all the superheroes and manga from there on out. This was a precursor of that. He did Metropolis as like a little periodical series leading up to Astro Boy. And he learned a lot from it. And so he was never really happy with Metropolis. He thought Metropolis seemed unfinished. It's really, kind of rough around the edges, had a lot of unfinished ideas. A lot of the things you picked up on, and actually in your opening statement, Tezuka would probably agree with you. He was he appreciated it for where it got him, but he never really felt like it was his opus. You know what I mean? Like Astro Boy or some of his later works. It just kind of was a learning process for him because it was in the early days. Okay. So Rintaro, the director of this film and creator of this film, actually worked for Tezuka way back in the 50s. And was with him like all the way through. And he was like his homie and directed certain episodes of Astro Boy, the animated show in the 60s, I believe, or late 50s after Astro Boy had really taken hold. It became a cartoon, kind of in the kin of Speed Racer, or like one of those, cheesy little anime cartoons back in the day with the swanky music and all that. And so Rintaro really wanted to make this. Tezuka was like, nah, man, we're not doing that. Well, then Tezuka passed away. And Rintaro said, wahaha, and decided he was going to go ahead and see this through. And he did. And he worked many years on this. And so, that's kind of a little backstory and also may fill in some of the gaps that you may have been wondering about like some of the unfinished concepts or ideas. This was based on the Fritz Lang movie, the silent film. Tezuka kind of made his own version of that and then peppered in all these fun manga characters to play in that world. That's why I said it's like equally steeped in that lore, because Fritz Lang's Metropolis deals with the class disparity and the robots replacing the laborers. There is a female robot that they create. There's a mad scientist character that kind of subs in for Dr. Lawton. There's a lot of overlap here, but it's not like a shot-for-shot remake, because you don't get all that, sweet manga cuteness, and you don't get rock that was created by, the writer and all of that. So anyway, just thought I'd give you a little backstory.
By the way, I appreciate that. How do we feel about them swooping in after Tezuka's death? Like, they spent so many of his years like, hey, can we make this? No. Hey, can we make this? No. Hey, can we make this? No. Passes away. Mrs. Tezuka, Osamu said we could make his thing into a movie.
Absolutely. Okay? Yep. Yep.
Like, it's so funny because it's like, I mean, you can tell that they really respect him, but also they're like, yeah, well, he's dead now. He can't stop us. Let's do it, baby.
No, I mean, there's literally an interview that I watched with Rintaro that he said, if Tezuka was alive today, this movie would not have been made.
いや、手塚さんいたらできなかったでしょ。手塚さんは嫌がったんじゃないですかね。多分。
間違いなくやっぱり嫌がったでしょうね。
すでに前に嫌がってたんですもんね。
だからまずこんなもんダメだって言ってまず降りないでしょうね。
It was a tongue-in-cheek kind of chuckle. I mean, because you have to understand, Rintaro and Tezuka, I believe, were very close homies. So he was saying it out of jest. But yeah, it's my understanding Tezuka would have, not wanted this to be seen. It was his earlier work. Just like our earlier work on this very podcast. If you go back and scroll way down here on YouTube and go watch some of our earlier stuff, not as good. Not as good.
We all start somewhere, dude.
We all start somewhere, baby.
Somewhere.
Yeah, we all start somewhere. Our first episodes sound like NPR episodes, like we're eating rice cakes, talking real slow.
Yes, that's a very interesting point, Ryan.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's like we're on Xanax, all pretentious. Anyways, carry on.
Up next on Movie Talk, let's discuss what happens with the Werner Herzog classic, Aguirre.
I will say the Fritz Lang Metropolis, a couple things about that. It was very controversial as it was a favorite of old boy Hitler, as in the Hitler.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he loved that old class disparity
You don't have
thing.
to specify which one. Like, which was Hitler 1 or Hitler 3? Like, we all know which one.
Jimmy Hitler from down the block? No, the Hitler. No, yeah, he was a big fan of that old class disparity thing, and that kind of worked in his favor.
Sure he was, yes.
Also,
replacing all of the workers with robots, probably right up there on his list of things to do.
Right. So also, nobody liked this movie, the first Metropolis, Fritz Lang's, total failure, box office failure. It was a huge expensive endeavor because the miniatures that they made and all of that was just of Blade Runner proportions. If you go back and watch it, you'll be like, oh shit, dude, old Fritz Lang was trying some things. But nobody believed at that time when it came out, I believe it was 1927 or something like that, that technology would ever ruin society. They're like, get out of here with that. Technology replacing humans.
Happy 2025.
Yeah, I thought I had a nice old long chuckle when I saw that. I was like, oh boy. They're like, nah, technology will never corrupt society. It will do nothing but good. Yeah. Yep. Anyways, here we are. Sorry, folks.
Absolutely, man. Now, from there, let's move on to the screenplay, which this is where I felt it was kind of a mixed bag, right?
Okay.
Like, first of all, crazy that it's Katsuhiro Otomo that ended up doing the screenplay. This is the guy that made Akira, for anybody who doesn't know. And that was a super fun realization. Like, before, we do these things, Ryan and I have little discussions where we talk about what movies we're going to do for these little mini-series. And I had no idea that Otomo was a screenwriter here. So that was like not a connection that was, intentionally made. So it's always fun when these little coincidences show up and stuff like that.
Sure.
It's very fun. So now I thought the script introduced a lot of interesting concepts, but as I kind of alluded to earlier, that it sort of failed to necessarily explore them in deep and meaningful ways. Like, there's a lot of angles and storylines set up in that first third to roughly first half of the film. But then after that, the story kind of shifts to like almost a sort of classic, like lovers on the run style thing, right? Where we have Tima and Kenichi, sort of just on the run, and they're being chased by Rock, and like Tima's falling in love with Kenichi, and he's probably falling in love back with her. And so, it moved the story forward. So in terms of like a narrative and like moving the action forward, I understand why they would do that. And as you had mentioned before, Rock was a new addition to the screenplay. Rock does not appear in the original comic. And that was another sort of character that I thought was interesting. But again, I really wanted it to be more of like an examination of sort of that social class strife. I would have loved to have seen more of that. And maybe even the film could have benefited from a deeper look into Tima's self-awareness and lack thereof, regarding being a robot and stuff like that. But what about you? It sounds like the screenplay really worked for you?
Well, to be honest, yes and no. I gave it a pass because of its innocence. It was kind of more of a character-based film for me. Like, I really look at this more like, I put this more in the class of like The Iron Giant or WALL-E or something like that. Like, sure, WALL-E touches on a lot of those heavier themes of climate change and, how technology has changed our labor class and all of that, with all the people in the chairs and they're too fat to walk and all of the things. But, at the end of the day, it's about, two little robots and they're super cutesy. And so, yes, those things are all happening in the background, but they never really take precedence, and we never dive too deep into them. They're just there to kind of like give a skeleton for the meat of our characters to kind of move within. So I just kind of looked at it. high level like that. I was having so much fun watching these characters and watching the adventure they were on. And then also, just to be fair, like in the end, I think that's all the comic was too. Like, I think it was way more about the fun little, bubbly, happy, big-eyed characters than it ever was about, making a social statement or anything along those lines. Again, comic books of that era, Captain America, Superman, they were all fighting, Nazis. They were all, standing up for the greater good and all these things. But at the end of the day, so they had those things happening in the background, and certainly they were making somewhat of a statement, but it was for kids. And this is kind of a teenager kind of movie. I don't really see this as like a heavier film like Perfect Blue or even Akira for that matter. So I gave it a little bit of a mulligan on that status. But I do see your point.
That's
and
fair.
if you wanted that out of it, I don't want to cheat you of it. And so that's just your opinion. But I personally kind of look past it a little bit because I was having so much fun.
Yeah.
Every time, we were following, just to kind of take the conversation forward a little bit, we were following so many different characters throughout. We were bouncing around and moving. The one thing I would agree with you on that I do think was painted over too briefly was the common class in the basement or below in the underground. I wish we would have spent, because we do spend quite a bit of time there. That's where Kenichi's kind of hiding out with Tima. You have the detective down there looking, Rock's down there looking. And so we just kind of really touch on the people that filled out that area. We didn't spend any time really getting to know any of those characters. It was very briefly touched on. I think that may have been the one and only time that I felt a little cheated, is like, we're already down here. You brought us down here. Maybe let Kenichi get a little more help, than just from, because we meet Fifi, who is one of my favorite characters. That was my Pero. When Fifi ate it, oh man, my heart just broke. That was like such a sad slow motion death scene. But other than Fifi,
it's like one of those characters that like by design, it's the way that like they design BB-8 or whatever it is in like Star Wars. Like it's put together in like a factory to be adored because it's like this like giant, big, helpful, friendly marshmallow of a trash can that's just like going through. But then it also makes these little like cute chirpy noises like a cat or something. And you're like, well, there's no part of this that isn't adorable. So yeah, I totally get Fifi. And it would have been cool to see them do a little bit more. Yeah, because it's like if you're gonna work the dog in, like you got to have the dog save the day. Dog's got to have a scene where he comes in and like rescue. They did it in Dante's Peak and Volcano. Like they did it in all of them.
Right.
So like it would have been nice to have Fifi, but I do think like at least Fifi like survives because we see them at the very end.
What was that? I was confused on that. Was that Fifi or was that just another one? Because we saw there was like a bunch of them. So I wasn't sure if that was just another one or.
It's hard to say. Like, I wasn't even sure if that they don't necessarily have some sort of like hive mind or something that they all sort of operate off of.
Maybe.
Look, but
I'm here to tell
there
you,
was that recognition from Fifi where they like run to them at the end.
I'm gonna believe that that's Fifi because that was my Artax moment from Neverending Story.
You have to try.
I was really sad about Fifi. So.
Yeah. And I also was, surprised to go back after the fact and realize that Rock was a new character, because I thought that they did do a really good job of very organically building him into this universe, like he doesn't feel like a character that's been shoehorned in or doesn't belong. Like you're not like, oh yeah, the all the characters work, but this Rock guy just like came out of left field. He feels very much a part of this world and a part of this story. And I actually thought for a while that they were going to kind of maybe do like a Blade Runner thing with him or not.
That's what I was thinking.
They show him early on going and shooting the robots that, either like go out of their zone or they've gone rogue or whatever it is. And so it kind of seemed like maybe they were going there. But it's funny that you kind of thought the same thing as well.
Totally did. I was waiting for him to have his Rutger Hauer monologue moment. Yeah.
Like tears in rain.
Yeah, right.
In the rain. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, but also, part of me does wonder is it's like by introducing him as that character, is that kind of what forced the picture into maybe more of like an actiony mold, that like Lovers on the Run mold that I was talking about? Did that prevent us from getting into some of the more contemplative aspects a little bit. Like, I'm not saying that it necessarily did, but it does make me wonder. And once again, dude, I also just thought with Perot was such an interesting character. He's this, detective robot guy, which, like, sweet, dude. You have robot PI, like, I'm already in. Like, that should be a TV show. I'm sure it was in the 80s. Robot PI. And
dude,
so
you just had me you just had me playing Fallout 4, and there's a cyborg detective that almost
totally
overlays on top of Perot in
100%
in that game. And so, having just beat it for the very first time a few weeks ago, like 200 hours deep for any nerds out there that have ever played Fallout 4, that game completely consumed my life for way too long. But
finally got him to get into it like 8 years to 10 years after it came out, but better late than never.
But the Diamond City detective there, it was same deal as Perot. Looked the same.
Now, I'd also like to discuss the score, which
might
arguably be one of the film's strongest suits, if not its strongest suit. Like,
so good.
I'm not necessarily going to say what I said on our last review of Akira, where it's like one of the like best scores of all time, because I think Akira has that. But it's an excellent, top-notch 5-star score. It's really wonderful. It was composed by this internationally recognized saxophonist. I believe his name is Toshiyuki Honda. And he absolutely brings the film to life. Like, and one of the most interesting things to note is that, like, how many variations of the film's central theme we get over the course of the movie. And this was very much by design. The director, Rintaro, kind of wanted, like, a theme where it could have a central melody in his instructions, or that it has to sound good in like any number of different styles, right? So it's like, okay, we're going to do a New Orleans swanky jazz style. We're going to do like, 94.7 The Wave vocal pop version of this, right? We're going to do like a, thumping electronic beat version of this. And like whatever melody you come up with, like it has to work as all of those different styles. Mm-hmm. So, it took them a while, but once he keyed in on something, he was able to transform it into like all of these different sort of themes and movements. And when you actually like sit down and break down how many different times that melody is used in these different styles, it's really quite fascinating that they were able to do that. But yeah, just all across the board, thought the score was wonderful. Ryan,
Same.
How about for you?
I don't think this movie works without it. It's very, very odd how the swanky jazz and blues in an anime film, like I would never have thought that that'd be a pairing that would go together so well. But again, with the Art Deco, architecture, and it's kind of got a classic vintage vibe. Some of those opening scenes almost felt like very Great Gatsby-esque. So I get where they were going with it. But, New Orleans jazz, that swanky jazz, like none of this screams New Orleans. And so I know, right? Very, very odd. But it's so fun. And it just, it's upbeat and it's peppy and it's sad. There's some blues stuff going on. And yeah. And then to think that none of it was made by anyone, within 4,000 miles of New Orleans or the American South, Deep South, is just like, because, New Orleans jazz, that swanky jazz is really all its own, different than Chicago blues or jazz or, any kind of other, geographically, it's very much its own thing. So, it's even got some Zydeco in there. You got those Creole island kind of rhythms that have percolated in New Orleans, to give it some influence. And so, yeah, man. And then all culminating in that final climax with Ray Charles, I Can't Stop Loving You. In that scene, you have all this action going on. And then we mentioned this in Akira as well. Sometimes it's not the sound, but the absence of sound that's so powerful. And it goes dead silent for like, I don't know, 3-4 seconds. It seems like an eternity because the shit's about to hit the fan. And because Tima's taken over and there's about to be, she's about to blow shit up. And then all of a sudden.
And Brock's trying to like blow up the headquarters, basically.
Right. Yeah. All this stuff is going down. Like we're getting down to it. And so, and then it just goes dead silent. And, you're just sitting there like, oh boy, what's going on? And then there's this slow strum of a harp that opens that song up. And then I just didn't see that song of all songs being what all this
Yeah.
violence and chaos and mayhem was going to, wrap it all up with. It was just chef's kiss, man. I had goosebumps watching it.
That's part of what makes it work so well, is that it does a really good job of like, it's not like a what a twist surprise, but because up to that point, there's been no use of commercially released music up to that point.
Right.
And there's been no soundtrack selections. It's all just been pure score. It does surprise. And, there's no real reason that you would or should expect it. But yeah, there's just, it's one of those confident decisions that you just know as a creator is going to work, because there's nothing about the film up to that point that says that decision really should be as effective as it is. Mm-hmm. And on paper, I'm sure there were people that like tried to shoot him down, be like, dude, that feels like it's coming from a different movie. Why would you do that
right.
here?
Yeah.
Because just logically and intellectually, it does kind of seem that way. But yeah, again, it's just one of those instinctive moves that somebody makes and they know it's going to work. And like, you just, okay, dude, it's your show. And then they just absolutely crushes. And it's like, wow, don't know where you pulled that decision from, but excellent choice. Yeah.
It's not even the obvious choice, because the obvious choice would be What a Wonderful World, right?
Sure, yeah.
Something like that, like something
or
very notable.
What's the Stanley Kubrick one from Dr. Strangelove?
See, now you got me fucked up, because now I can't think of what that song is. But yes, that one too. But yeah, I Can't Stop Loving You is a song that we've all heard. We all are familiar with. Ray Charles, one of the greatest singers and musicians of all time. And yet it's not like in the common lexicon, right? It's like one of those common adjacent songs that are just kind of parked over on the side. So,
dude, it kind of felt like a Fallout song or a Fallout moment to me a little bit.
Yeah.
Like you talked about Fallout a minute ago, and it's like they always do that in that game, in that series, even in the TV series, right? Is marrying this like old traditional like pop vocal music
from the 50s or 40s or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And stripping out most of the sounds and, really letting that do a lot of the driving and heavy lifting. And it creates just this weird juxtaposition of like, physical violence on screen, but yet with, in terms of explosions or, whatever, what have you, but with music that is the exact opposite of that, and it makes for a very interesting experience.
And, to note, the visuals in that moment are very powerful. You're losing people, that you've been with the entire film. People are dying. Buildings are, crashing down. Entire elite class is coming down. Yeah, it's a powerful moment with a beautiful song put behind it. And I just loved every minute of it. It was such a great way to. And then you get an epilogue after that to kind of catch your breath and see the aftermath of what had actually happened there. But yeah, what a way to wrap up this movie. I loved it so much.
Absolutely. One of the other musical decisions that I really, really loved that like stood out, and it's obviously much less effective, but in the mall when like the security robots are responding to the fire, and their sirens go on, and there's that like jazz song where like the saxophone literally does this like wah, wah, like kind of like almost like a cat's wail, but it sounds so much like a siren's wail, but it's still like very distinctively coming from some sort of brass instrument. I'm sure a saxophone.
It's kind of diegetic.
I just thought, yeah, exactly. And it was so perfectly done. Like it was one of those things, again, you hit the nail on the head where it's like, it's a score decision, but it almost sounds like it's diegetic to the film because it almost sounded like a sound effect the way that they incorporated it. And so it's like, there's just like a number of small decisions that like in and of themselves maybe don't carry like a ton of weight, like I said, the way that, the Ray Charles song decision does. But it's just like more and more examples of just really, really solid decision making, for what to put in here from a technical standpoint. And now in terms also curious, did you watch the US dub or did you watch the original Japanese voices with subtitles?
So this is kind of my rule of thumb, and I discussed this on Akira, and I stand by this with this and the future films in our anime series that we'll get to here shortly. My first watch with any of these kinds of films, I always like to watch subbed when possible. Yeah. So I like to get the authentic experience. It's, the movie nerd in me or whatever. I don't like to jump right to the dub if I can avoid it. So I watched this with subtitles in the original Japanese.
So then, I was going to say, since this was your first viewing, I'm sure it was Japanese with subs. So cool. Yeah. That's how I watched it myself as well. Did you see anything about the voice actors that they got for the original Japanese vocals?
I did not, no.
Yeah. So it was pretty interesting because for like three of our most main characters. I say most main characters because there's a lot of different characters that could be considered main characters in here, especially over the course of that first half of the film.
Mhm.
But you've got to figure that Kenichi and Tima and Rock are three of the main characters. And all three of those voice actors were, up until then, amateur voice actors. They had never done anything professionally whatsoever beforehand. So all three of those were complete newbies. This was their first professional voice acting gigs that they got.
Nice.
And it was, and I got to say, like, I thought that they did a really nice job.
Sure.
You know, like it's always a little bit difficult to be able to critique voice acting from other langues.
Another language, right.
Like I don't speak multiple languages. So a lot of the nuances of, you know, when they're doing like I think that emotional nuance kind of comes through regardless, right? Like if an actor reads something with like a sad inflection versus, you know, happy inflection, we can kind of get the different shades of emotion. But
I'll give you that.
What I will say is that as I watched it, you know, I think just very sort of like basically the voices that I was hearing seemed to match the characters that I was seeing on screen, you know, which I think is a huge part of it.
It didn't take me out of it, and I was along for the ride. So hats off to everyone that and if it's their first go, you know, if they're amateur and, you know, they just done some light commercial work or something, good on them. They killed it. Yeah,
definitely. I do know that the main detective, arguably again one of our main characters, Shun Saku, I believe is his name.
Okay.
He's like done very cartoonishly in the US dub, from what I heard.
Oh,
like it
got
almost
it. Okay.
seemed like it was like very, very much cartoonish, where it didn't come across that way so much in that original Japanese. And I will say that in particular, I do think the voice actress for Tima did a really wonderful job of playing the character, because it's like all throughout her readings and such, you do get this strong sense of like fragility from this character, especially like the way it's like outwardly projected. But that it's also masking this very sort of powerful, unrealized strength from within that we're going to see, you know, before the end of the movie. So yeah.
I mean, the one thing I noticed about Tima is that there was a really solid balance between being able to evoke emotion, like you felt for her character and you were along for that ride and you wanted to see her have her arc. And then when she turned, you know, towards the end and fulfilled her destiny, or was fulfilling her destiny or whatever, and eventually, you know, passed away, you really went along for that ride emotionally. However, she also played the part very emotionless as a robot. So, you know, that was kind of a hard line to draw. You know, oftentimes you see that in a character like Fifi, for example, that can do that, or like a Wally or an R2-D2 or whatever, but they don't have a lot of lines and they're just kind of a side character, and you really feel for them as an underdog sidekick. But, you know, Tima is one of the main characters, so we have to buy into that. Otherwise the movie doesn't work. And I thought she did a great job of, you know, maintaining, because she doesn't know she's a robot, and neither does Kenichi or any of the characters around her. So I thought she did a great job, that the voice actress, as it were, that, you know, to play it emotionless, those beats, but yet be able to evoke emotion. I thought that was a really interesting line. She was high wire act. She was walking there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
There is one thing I want to bring up real quick before we put a button on this. And that is one thing that stood out to me is the use of lighting in this. Once again, mimicked a lot of the techniques that I saw in Akira. When we saw Tima kind of fulfilling her destiny in the middle of the movie, when she was in the underground hiding out or whatever, and she was up on that marquee or whatever, and her hair was growing, and she was like very angelic. And she was basked in this wonderful glow. It almost looked airbrushed. I don't know how they did it, but they were some of the buildings, some of the spotlights. I don't know what these anime artists are doing, but there is a wonderful use of lighting and glow that they're able to emulate and bring out of it. I don't know, maybe it was computers, but I know it wasn't with.
I do think that they were able. That's
Akira,
where some of the computer stuff came into play. Where they were talking about how like a lot of it was just sort of used to like heighten what was already there, to add textures to some of the animation. So I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of that was sort of the interplay between the two mediums. Yeah,
because it really, you know, gave another dimension to an otherwise 2D hand-drawn animation style. So I thought that was really nice.
Yeah.
Also, very quickly, how about those sweet, sweet iris ins and out transitions that we haven't seen in like 50 years? When they would go with the little circle that would like go into the, something of note.
Yeah, the little Looney Tunes circle.
Yeah, dude, it was fantastic. I love the little iris ins and outs. I thought it was such a vintage classic throwback way of, in the midst of all the Art Deco design and the old classic jazz and the Ray Charles stuff. And then, to kind of throw in even the transitions, wipes and iris ins and outs and so forth of things that we haven't seen in many years. I thought it was a cool little touch from the editing department. Be like, yeah, we could be retro too. We could be vintage.
Yeah, I almost wonder if that's maybe a nod to the comics. Like, I wonder if the comics did that.
That would be interesting. I'd be curious.
Graphic novel.
Yeah. Just a little fun little bit that I thought, was different from anything else I've ever seen. That was cool.
So, but yes, let's go ahead and let's wrap this up here with our 3 scenes like we like to do. And Ryan, this is where we point to the 3 scenes that we feel best represent our overall response to the movie being discussed. In this case, it is Metropolis. And as always, I will let you kick us off with your 3 scenes, sir.
Man, that's bitten you in the ass before. Let's see how this goes. I think last time we had the exact same ones. I don't know if this will...
First time, yeah, we had the exact same 3. Like, not necessarily uncommon for us to have one. Every now and then we get 2, but Akira was the first time where we had all 3 scenes exactly the same. So yeah, let's see what happens here.
Well, rattling them off, mine are what I call Trouble at Dr. Lawton's. That's where the murder and fire happens. Kind of kicks off the whole movie. Up until that point, you're just kind of having a fun go and introducing the characters. But that's when the kind of Act 1 kind of shifts into Act 2 and everything moves ahead at a rapid fire pace. And the animation there and the fire and all of that was second to none. That was really, really good stuff. The second is Fifi's Sacrifice. That's where they really tugged on my heartstrings. I audibly said to my television, no, I was very, very sad at Fifi's Sacrifice. Again, evoking a lot of emotion out of an otherwise minor character. And then how could you not include that sweet, sweet Ray Charles finale? We talked about it ad nauseum throughout the show. And it's arguably the best scene in the film or sequence in the film.
Sure.
So I just can't exclude it because it's, maybe the most popular or the most talked about. I'm going to throw it in there anyway. Sweet Ray Charles finale.
Absolutely.
Silence to harp, intro, and beautiful chaos ensues. How about you, Jason?
Yeah, well, we got one, but we still got 2 different ones here that we can go with. So my first is when Perot attempts to stop the resistance of the revolutionaries, I think it's a cool scene because it sort of shows the naivete of robots and understanding the nuances of being human. It's a PI, it's a protection bot, so all it knows is like, hey, there's this uprising, I've got to go in and like use force to stop it because that's what I do. And obviously that ends up leading to him being offed in a very unceremonious way. The next scene we see him, he's just a pile of gears and parts. And so again, I think it does sort of help to continue to establish that contrast between the robots and what they've just been programmed to do. And why, the lower class of workers and the humans, et cetera, do have a problem with, some of these robot creatures. The second is actually just this nice little art shot where it's this overhead shot of a robot and he's got these balloons and he ends up getting shot by the revolutionary parade that's sort of like gathering. It ends up releasing the balloons and they sort of float up toward the camera, which again is overhead. And then the camera sort of switches to show the balloons continuing to like fly out into the sky. And you see that there's this like amazing castle in the clouds. And this is right after they've done like the nuclear test. So we see like the sky is sort of like changing colors as a result of those tests. And this is just like a great example of the artistry of the animation and those world building moments that this film takes, where there's probably a number of moments like that that I like the one that I just established that could easily be taken out of the film from a narrative standpoint, right? But in a film where the narrative isn't necessarily the strongest aspect of it, and it is a lot of these sort of world building moments and these artistic sequences and these creative decisions. I thought that was a really strong representation of sort of that aspect of this movie,
Sure.
And then the third, that I have is, yes, same, that final shot of the ziggurat exploding with no sound other than that wonderfully expressive Ray Charles song. Again, just a great representation of the absolutely stellar use of sound and all of the creative decisions that they made. It's powerful, it's resonant, and it sets up that final moment with Tima and Kenichi perfectly.
So sad.
Yeah. So with our 3 scenes out of the way, we will go ahead and go on to our star rating. And, this film was still good enough for me for 4.5 out of 5 stars. I did really, really love and appreciate this film. Like I said, I would have loved to have seen a little bit more time spent on some of those, deeper class-related struggle moments. Just would have liked to have seen the screenplay go into that a little bit more. But to your point, Ryan, there's still so much on the table here with regards to the visual elements, the unique world building, the great use of hand-drawn animation, everything about it. It's a really, really wonderful film. 4.5 out of 5 stars. How about for you, buddy?
Same. I gave this 4.5 stars. Man, I love this film so much. I would watch it again right now. I would recommend it to anybody. That's another thing that should be mentioned is I think anyone could watch this. You could watch this with your kids.
I agree with that too.
There's nothing really, aside from some minor violence, maybe that you would want to shelter from your children or anything. But young and old, I think this is something you could watch with the whole family and really have a good time. I have to always check myself. I can't just always give out 5 stars. That has to be reserved for the highest echelon. And Akira is right up there. You got, a lot going for Akira. This is close though, man. I really wanted to give this 5 stars. This is 5-star adjacent. It is right in the wheelhouse. It's right next door. It's living right next door to 5 stars.
Nice. Excellent. Love to hear it. So to everybody watching and listening, if you enjoyed this review of Metropolis, we do invite you to like and subscribe to our videos and channel. We're in the middle of our sci-fi anime miniseries right now. Just kicked that off with Akira, as we've been mentioning throughout this episode. So if you're interested, please do go check that out. Also, feel free to leave us comments right here on the YouTubes about what you thought about this movie, Metropolis, or perhaps our review of it. Did you agree with us, disagree with us? Take umbrage with anything we had to say. We always love to hear from those of you that take the time to watch our reviews, and we truly do appreciate you watching as well as interacting with us. So this has been Esoterica Cinema, looking at Metropolis. For myself, Jason Peters, and my good friend Ryan Seybold, keep on appreciating film and enjoy the movies.